Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is a writer of comics like Parasocial and Bad Karma, as well as the co-writer of Scrapper. It's Alex de Campi. Thanks for coming on, Alex.
Thanks, David. Glad to be here.
So I know you've had an unexpected couple days, but how is the day starting for you? Has it been a busy day? Have you got any writing done? What has the day been like for you?
I work a day job, and I also I volunteered at dog rescue. So I had an emergency foster dog arrive on Sunday night, and that involved almost no sleep on Sunday night because integrating dogs and the dog barking in the crate and feeling bad about my neighbors. And now there is peace in the valley. You won't be able to see this on the podcast, but the foster dog and one of my two dogs is both sleeping quietly on the bed behind me. And so I got lots of sleep last night, which was fantastic. And then a big report at my day job got published and removing a lot of stress from my life, which was also fantastic. Don't ask how long it's been since I've done creative writing, because it's been a while. I have like 3 projects in progress, and I just haven't gotten to them because I also, unusually for a writer, I letter my books.
Right.
And so I've been in production on first Parasocial, which got finished in February, second Bad Karma, which admittedly we serialized on Panel Syndicate, but I then went back and like substantively relettered and did a lot of design work on for the Image Comics hardcover release. That got finished in like March. Then I had Scrapper as a monthly, and I don't do monthly comics that often because they just don't suit my lifestyle. You know, and even though this was only a mini series, some things happened that involved the issues coming in very, very late, which squeezed me at the end because I'm lettering them. And it became, I love that book. I'm so happy with the look of it. I'm so happy working with Cliff and Jordy and Ryan and Juan for covers. It was a lot of work, and we just wrapped the trade. And actually, I have to go into Illustrator and make like 2 tweaks on the cover, and then the trade is off, which will be a hardback trade because I only do hardbacks from Image. So then, I'm doing a project with Tom Fowler that we worked on the outline extensively together, and now I need to actually write. I need to finish a middle grade book I'm doing with Carla Speed McNeil. I've got 4 out of 6 chapters scripted, and then my next book with Erica, I need to actually deal with it. Oh, and there's a half-finished novel.
Oh, wow.
So there's all this like creative stuff waiting in the wings for me to stop doing lettering for a little while. I've got another book completely ready that's going to come out through Dark Horse. It's a YA book, but I just looked at it. I'm like, I can't letter this. I can't. So Hassan is going to letter it in February for me because I need to not letter that book.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually had several patron questions from Patreon about your role as a writer and a letterer. And I do think it's interesting. This is something I hadn't thought of before we started recording. You have an unusual perspective in the sense that you have a creative job at the beginning and a creative job at the end. And so if deadlines slip, or if your deadlines slip as a writer, not that that necessarily happens very often, then you feel it at the end as the letterer too. It's interesting. You have you can feel like the full brunt of everything happening, and you all...
Oh, and I'm essentially editing and producing my own book. So not only I'm managing the schedule and chasing after people. And that's why Scrapper was hard for me because things were coming in super, super late. And then I had to letter them and get them off. And we're shipping on time, got everything in on time. But, and I'm a single mom with a day job. I'm also an incredibly slow letterer. Like I always joke that it's like artisanal lettering because it's just, I letter like 8 pages a day max.
Yeah.
And people who can do an entire issue then. Because I hand draw every balloon. I spend a lot of time like integrating the lettering into the design of the page so it doesn't stand out. And it's just a lengthy process.
I do think that's fun. Really, you can tell because, you listened to my podcast with Erica about Parasocial, and there was this one part in the book where there was a word inside one of the characters' mouths, and I couldn't tell if it was Erica doing sound effects or if it was you doing lettering. And it was you doing lettering from what I understand.
That was actually in the script.
Yeah.
That was all the way. So there's a lot of stuff I just I riff on, and this is why I enjoy collaborating with one other creator on a book or a line artist and a color artist, and that's it. Because it just becomes this jazz band thing where we're passing it back and forth a little bit. And so if I write very, very complete scripts down to shot sizes in the panel descriptions, but I also have a big health warning at the front that's if you don't like this, you don't have to do it. I don't care. It's fine. If you can do better, please do better. The specificity is there just so I feel I am doing my job as a writer and giving the artist, the line artist and color artist, a baseline visual pacing and a baseline palette to work with. And then if they can think of something better, I encourage them to do so. And then it's very easy for me because even if they drew exactly what was in the script, which never happens, which is good, which is a feature, not a bug, I'm going to look at the lettering when I'm done and be like, oh, actually that balloon, we don't need it at all, or we should move that over there and like into the next panel, and we should split that up. And that needs a sound effect I didn't think about. And that doesn't need a sound effect. So I change a lot while I'm lettering. It doesn't really change the story, but it improves the flow of the story. And with Erica, she'll leave big white spaces. And I'm like, I could put the big fuck in the panel, or I could put it next to the panel. And I love giant sound effects. Like anytime I can put a 300-point sound effect in there, it's a good day.
I mean, I like all of that because it's, I feel like you're giving your collaborators, they have a strong structure to work off of. So they know where they're going. But within that structure, you're giving them flexibility to be their creative selves. And it's like when I talk to a lot of creative people, particularly artists, though, constraints they can be a bad thing, but they're not always a bad thing. Sometimes having that structure to bounce off of allows them to do their best work. And it seems like you're really kind of putting them in a position, somebody like Erica, to be her best self within the story that you've set up.
She understands what I'm trying to do. I'm very clear about the story point. I'm very clear about what in the panel is important and whether it's important for something that happens later on. Like there's a baseball bat in Parasocial, and like, we have Chekhov's bat very early. Like when I first tell her about the room, I'm like, this has to be over there. We don't see it yet, but as you lay out the room, there's this object is important. This is important. Otherwise, it's this. And so she is free to design the room as she wants, but she knows when that room first needs to be designed, that here are the objects. It's almost like a video game. Like here's the objects that if you click on will do something, and they will be clicked on later. So like, because if you don't do that, if you kind of keep it as a surprise for the artist, that's a real problem because the artist might have inked that page by the time they get to the thing later on that says, and they pick up the knife from the sofa or whatever, like, or they pick up the gun from behind the picture, and they're like, wait, what gun in what picture?
They could have drawn the sofa or drawn like the corner where the bat was supposed to be, and it wasn't there earlier, and then they have to go back.
One of the things I love, especially with my books, is that, especially Parasocial, is meant to be read several times because there are thriller elements to it that you won't see in first reading that don't make sense until you finished it and go back and look for them. And so we have to make sure those elements are there, so they're there on the reread. I
was doing this number a lot where I would go to a page and then I'd flip back, and I was doing a lot of reversals. But I did want to ask about your day job and the writing element of it, because obviously you have a lot going on. You have mini projects. You have 3 books that are coming out. Basically, I mean, Parasocial came out, was it early October? Yeah, it was early October.
Yeah, October 10th. And on the same day as the Watterson book and the Daniel Clowes book, because...
Oh, and did Roaming come out, the Jillian and Mariko Tamaki book? I'm trying to remember. That was a crazy week. Oh, no, Clementine book 2 from Tilly Walden.
Book 2 came out at the same time, yeah.
It was a wild week. It was a very, very busy week for comics, but you had that. And then November 1st was when the hardcover for Bad Karma came out. Scrapper is still coming out. So you have a lot going on, obviously, but
issue 5 of Scrapper comes out in a couple of weeks. Then issue 6 ends in December. And then there's a hardcover trade in late April.
Does that day job create a bit of a cap on how many projects you can take on or want to take on at one time outside that, your day job work?
I mean, yes and no. There are very few projects I want to take on. I really don't have any interest in work for hire unless it's like someone I know, like I specifically know the editor and am comfortable with them. It's why I do a lot of work for 2000 AD. They'll occasionally phone me up and say, will you do a thing? Sure. But, the pay for work for hire is so low and the extra crap you have to deal with is so high. And while I enjoy those characters and I'm happy for all the people they bring joy to, I am not so interested in them that I will work to fight my way into one of those companies to have the favor of like writing some C-list female character miniseries, which is what they give me. One of the nice things about the day job, other than the fancy healthcare, so hopefully you will never see a GoFundMe for me from my cancer care in 20 years. Yay, comics. So fancy healthcare, a reliable income stream, and then the ability to only do creator-owned work, to take as long as I want with it, and to work with only the people I want to work with. So this was a really odd year. I did not intend to have 3 projects on stands at one time. It just kind of happened. Scrapper came out of the blue through a mutual friend. Parasocial had always been planned for this. Bad Karma just kind of, we finally got it done, and like looked about a year out, would be like, oh, this is a good time, late enough that it falls in the sort of Christmas and holiday gifting group, because like book sales in November and December are huge, but early enough that it still might get on a few best of year lists. Unfortunately, we missed the ALA list. We're on the ALA list with Parasocial, but Bad Karma hopefully will be looked at for the 2024 list. I am a little burned out right now, as which is why the Dark Horse book, which has actually been finished for some time, is going to be lettered by someone else. I got to go through and do a lettering script for it, which will be weird. I am looking forward to just writing a little bit less. I've been working on the middle grade book off and on when I can, and I've done a lot of work on the project with Tom because it's a thriller / heist book set in the Middle Ages.
So it needs some research.
Yeah. And, I could just make it up like people do that, but I really enjoy research. I've read like 6 books on this particular military campaign and this particular political engagement, which is a fairly like lesser known, but really fascinating one. And, Tom's a giant nerd too. He actually just replied to a Twitter shit post of mine when I was talking about how frustrated I was with movies set in the Middle Ages. And I kind of like saw, I'd be like, this is, what I would do is this. And Tom's like, I'll draw that. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm doing book with Tom Fowler now. He's like, you're going to say no?
It's funny. That's like I know that's happened at least once before, because that was the birth of Hell's Kitchen Movie Club, right? It was Dave Acosta was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. And then Ryan pitched in. Ryan volunteered to do an episode of Hell's Kitchen Movie Club, and that's how I met Ryan, and also how I met Dee. So like literally Hell's Kitchen Movie Club birthed Bad Karma in many important ways. Because Bad Karma originally was like, what if we could do the Hell's Kitchen Movie Club miniseries? And then nobody was going to, I didn't even bother to ask. Like there was no way they were going to let me write that.
Yeah.
And also I just didn't want to write it for a corporation and then have them go make a TV miniseries out of it, and someone would make billions off it, and I would get like $70 a page.
For listeners that don't know, Hell's Kitchen Movie Club is a online comic on Tumblr that Alex did with an array of artists, including her collaborators on Bad Karma, Ryan Howe, and Dee Cunniffe, but originally it was with Dave Acosta, and it's about Frank Castle and Bucky Barnes watching action movies, basically. Well, not always action movies. Sometimes, one time there's discussion of Pixar at least.
The gag is that nobody wants to watch like military action movies with Frank and Bucky because they all think they're going to get triggered and violent. And so meanwhile, Frank and Bucky just sit there and drink and kind of laugh at the movies. And it's like their comfort watching, it's like the way I watch Final Destination as a comfort film is they'll watch, Die Hard or something as a comfort film. Bad Boys 2, Bucky complaining about like, that's not how you stop a freeway. I can tell you about the freeway. Yeah. But in taking that and creating our own characters from a very loose principle of like 2 friends who are military veterans who are disabled, going on a road trip to fix someone else getting blamed for a job they did like 15 years ago. But I could actually have it be characters where there were real consequences to their actions, like the magic, comics machine wouldn't have to like undo the consequences. They could be properly disabled. It could be not a major plot point. It could be part of their lives that affects their choices and actions, as anything that's part of our lives does. But it wasn't about their disability. They were just disabled characters doing a thing. I could have the character, the Frank's wife character not be dead, but like she divorced him and took the kids because like, why would you stay married to Frank Castle? And obviously she clearly ran his life when she did. And so he's like very kind of depressed now because there's no one organizing his life. Ethan, he's missing part of his left leg and has a lot of mobility issues. His ex-wife, Cheryl, and their 2 kids. I really enjoyed both writing Cheryl as a single mom, as parenting, because there's kind of very realistic parenting that goes on in there. And you don't see a lot of like realistic kids in comics, even from people who have kids, which I always found strange. And Ethan and Cheryl's relationship I really love because they can set each other off in seconds. Like they're the couple that's been together for a really long time, and they've been now divorced for so long that they can generally get along with each other pretty well. But like if one of them is in a mood, they can get the other one in a mood real fast. But also they can joke. There's like some damage under the bridge that they can just joke about now. So there's a connection because they are co-parents. They are, they did love each other at one point. They probably still do on some level. But they have a very complicated relationship, and that was a lot of fun to explore in Bad Karma.
I really this is like a random thing to bring up the research about, but I once did this article that was about Klaus Jansson's cover to The Punisher #1 from 1987, which I always thought was like an amazing cover, but also completely ridiculous. It's one where he's holding like a bazooka aimed at an apartment building directly in front of him. And I talked to a weapons expert from Pentagon News about what would happen if he actually fired it. And I always just thought that was generally called a bazooka. I didn't know that is specific. No. And so he told me, he was like, yeah, that's a Carl Gustav variant. And then when I was reading your book, there's a bazooka that shows up, and it's like they referred to it as a Gustav. And I saw that, and I was just like, I know what that is. And I'm like, you really did your research. Oh my God. I mean, like, not that I did a ton of research, but it was funny, like, reading that and just thinking about the mentality you have going into these things where it's not just like broad strokes. You want the specificity to be there, right?
Yes. Actually, like, it should have been changed everywhere to an AT4 because I think it was a Gustav in the old version. And then we switched it to an AT4, which is different. AT4 is a single shot, and it's the one that the Army actually uses right now.
I think there was Gustav, and it was referred to as an AT4, but maybe I don't know.
Hell's Kitchen Movie Club, there might have been a Gustav.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of both serving and veteran service people friends, and yeah, there was a whole crew of people that answered my dumbass civilian questions on everything from how would an AT4 realistically go missing from an Army base to a friend who used to be in Russia House in the CIA about like what are the titles of the chain. I had to be very specific about the questions I asked them, and that there are things that they would not tell me. But I could be like, if this person is this level, what would their boss be called?
Yeah.
What is the title of their superior? And that was a lot of fun. And obviously I did a lot of reading as well. So, but it was important to me that anyone who was in the Army who reads Bad Karma will be like, oh, I recognize those goggles. I recognize the iPro. I recognize, there's an armored personnel character. That's not the right carrier. That's not the right name for it. But there's the locations are real. Where Sully and Ethan did their Ranger graduation is exactly where the Rangers do it, with the big climbing wall in the background. And people like to be recognized in little things. I mean, even from the Kitchen Movie Club, I remember there was one thing where Bucky sits, Frank offers Bucky a beer, and Bucky says, sorry, new meds, can't drink. And the number of people who wrote me and said, I felt so seen. I take PTSD meds and you can't drink with them. And that was the first time I've seen it acknowledged in popular media. And that was great, And so that's like the people that come to me and say, like, I really appreciate you getting uber nerdy about the specific fact. It's very few of the audience, like maybe less than 5% of the people will care, but it matters to me. And and that less than 5% who do care sort of care so overwhelmingly that it's really nice to reflect their reality as best I can and as truthfully as I can. I mean, there is a lot of kind of, in both Bad Karma and Parasocial, there's a lot of very documentary feel to it. Parasocial, probably it's easier to see that for someone like yourself because it's about things like conventions, and we all know what a convention is. And so we had to make sure that someone reading it who had gone to comics conventions or who was in fandom communities, believed that we knew what we were talking about.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Looking for the right place to read digital comics? You can find it at Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses, all day and date. It's just like a comic shop where you pay per book, but digital. Omnibus has even upped its game lately, as they've added a web reader in store on top of its iPad version, with iPhone and Android coming soon. Looking for an ideal digital comic store, but with an excellent shopping and reading experience, one that uses novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book? And one that features many of the best comics and publishers in comics today, including publishers like Image, Boom, Dark Horse, and more? You can find all that on Omnibus. Visit the web store or download the app today at omnibus.app. And now, back to the show. I made a mistake. It was AT4 and Bad Karma. And the reason why I think I paired the two together was the Gustav in Hell's Kitchen Movie Club is because I read them back to back to the point where when I read the first page of Bad Karma, I actually was like, is this built from Hell's Kitchen Movie Club. And then I went and found out that that was in fact true. But before we get any further, before we talk about any more of your work, I do want to talk briefly about your background, because you talked about the people you know, you talked about people you've talked to and stuff. You're able to do that, I imagine, at least in part because you have such a fascinating background. I'm going to go on a spiel real quick. Besides writing comics, you worked in banking as an analyst. You've done qualitative research at a due diligence consultancy, I believe it was. You've been a journalist. You've written a couple novels and some screenplays. You've directed music videos and plenty more, I'm sure. You also have lived in Hong Kong, London, Manila, Mexico, and a couple other places beyond your current home of Manhattan. People say, write what you know. You know a lot, Alex. This could be an entire podcast by itself, but how do you feel that those different jobs and experiences have affected you both as a person and as a storyteller? Because I can't imagine you could go through all those experiences and not come out the other end with a much wider viewpoint than somebody who hasn't had them.
They have made me the writer I am. The day job stuff all kind of flows out of, like, I started off in Hong Kong as an investment banking analyst. And then, that took me a lot of places around the world. And then the move out into like due diligence consultancy and my current work, which is in marketing for asset management, all kind of flows out of that, in that, it was me moving away from being like, what I really want to do is build the models, the financial models, and then me doing that for a while and realizing I just don't want to be building this financial model for the rest of my life and like devoting my life to just studying the small, narrow groups of companies. And then I switched more onto a generalist position, which worked really well because I'd lived in so many places and I'd worked on so many different markets and sectors and companies that I'd seen a lot. So it made me very flexible about being able to dive in quickly and get my head around new but often very complex concepts, which stood well for the present job because my present job is different asset classes that I'm used to working on. And I'm picking them up quite quickly, which is good because I don't have a choice. The need to do research and to express things as truthfully as possible is kind of what I do in my day job, but also like make them easy to understand. So it's taking very complicated concepts, speaking to a highly educated audience, but also just being like, let's make this fun and easy for you to read about, and therefore you'll be interested in this and hopefully give us some of your money. And that carries through to the comic stuff as well. It's also really, really nice because the day job pays well. So I can go to comics, I can go to my creative work, and I am, doing more feature screenwriting, and I am hopefully going to do some directing again. I can go to comics and the novels. Novels are for when I get really frustrated with comics. I'm just like, I'm going to sit in a cave and write a novel. I can go to all that with a clear conscience and just feel like they benefit each other. I don't, other than trying to do the best job I can, I don't have a ton of ego in my day job. So if someone's like, oh no, this isn't right at all, you have to scrap it and start again, I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't care. Like, I'm going to go write a comic on the weekend that's got my name on it so I don't really mind that the paper, which is owned by the company anyway, is going to be changed. And the comics allows me to, just all of the day job stuff provides me the ability to do only the projects I want, and be very, very picky. But yeah, the research side and the understanding a lot of different people and cultures and situations, and having seen a bunch of stuff, some of which quite wild, it helps a lot. Been in some fairly sketchy situations. So, I mean, sometimes I'm reading a comic and I'm like, mate, have you ever been in and/or seen a fight?
Yeah, I was reading an interview you did, or maybe it might have been on your bio where you were talking about how you like snuck into Russia once.
Yeah, I'd spent a summer teaching during college, a summer camp in Putsku, which is near Gdansk. This was a long time ago. This was the year that there was the attempted coup against Gorbachev. So my parents were quietly freaking out. And I'm like, it's fine. The kids were from this town called Przemyśl, which is right on the border of the Polish border with Slovakia and the Ukraine, which at that point was still part of the USSR. Not for very long. And you could take a hike up on the mountain that was on the border. And I decided to do that. And you get to the top of the mountain, it's not quite above the tree line. At a certain point, you're standing there and it's like there's like sort of 20-foot wide clear cut strips where the borders are. But there's no border, like there's no fence or border police or anything. It's like the middle of fucking nowhere. And I'm just standing there like, I feel like I'm standing on a map. What if I go across that? And me being like a 17-year-old and a total shithead decides that obviously, yes, this is the thing to do. So I run across, well, yes, I can rush it, run back, come down, visit the kids. And the kids are like, you dumb. They're like, they have motion detectors. Those are clear cut, so they can run jeeps along there. And another kid's like, look, they're probably so surprised that anyone wants to sneak into Russia that they wouldn't just let the novelty value. And then they told me this great story about this little old lady who used to basically play doorbell ditch with the Russians. She used to go to the border crossing in Lvov on the road to Lvov, which used in the Ukraine, which used to be which is one of these cities that have gone back and forth between Poland and Russia for so long that the Polish are like, this is actually our city, and Ukraine's like, no, actually it's ours. And so there's people have feelings about it. So she would, and families got split up as like people suddenly couldn't see their relatives anymore. Usual story of Europe in the 20th century, unfortunately. And so she would go up and she would stomp on the motion detectors in the middle of the night, wake up all the Russians, and then run away. Repeatedly. I was like, this is great. This is the greatest story I've ever heard.
Have you ever met Torunn Grunbeck? She's a comic writer.
I have, yes.
I feel like you two would get along famously because you two have had very interesting lives in very different ways, and also kind of have like similar interests when it comes to writing and things like that. I don't know. There's like this very small list of people that I've had my podcast that I'm just like, these are just some of the most interesting people I've ever talked to. And Torunn's up there. You're up there. Chris Schweitzer's up there. I mean, it's really interesting to hear about these experiences. But I did want to bring up something you said in your bio and something you've repeated in interviews. You've mentioned that you have a magpie heart, which you say is a polite way of saying you can never pick a lane and stay in it. And I imagine a lot of that comes from, a lot of it's yourself, but a lot of it's also like you've experienced a lot of things. And I think I can see that magpie heart in your work, whether it's in the formats you take on or like taking on digital formats like, or digital platforms like Panel Syndicate and Webtoon, or kickstarting something like Maddie, and even the subject matter you write about. Do you find that magpie heart comes out in you really wanting to experiment in comics and try new things? Like it's like something you just can't help but do?
Yes. I think I could never leave comics because there's always another person I want to work with before I go. And there's always something I want to try out. I mean, a lot of what Erica and I did in Dracula Motherfucker and Parasocial is just like experimental storytelling. Let's see if this works. Like let's try to tell a story this way. Let's try to do something that couldn't be done anywhere except comics. And we sort of don't care if it succeeds. Like the whole point of it is just to try something in an environment where you're supported to try things as crazy as possible, because that's the only way you learn. That's the only way you get better. That's the only way you stay fresh as a creator. Even from the beginning, like a lot of what Carla Speed McNeil and I were doing in No Mercy was highly experimental, and we would just do experimental one-offs, one shots in that series. I'll always do that. Like I'm very much a formalist, so I like to do odd formal things in comics, but I also like to kind of make them not obvious, because the whole point isn't look at my like exciting, intelligent formalism. It's like, let's see if I can do this really over intellectualized thing and make you not really notice it at all. Yeah, I mean, the magpie heart thing also comes up in, I could never do what Ed Brubaker does and just like go really narrow on one topic. I mean, Ed's fantastic. He's a wonderful, wonderful writer. Like I am not in any way encouraging Ed. Like I wish I could sell as many books as Ed. It would be great.
You do everything.
But I finish a thing and then I'm like, I've just done this thing. And also because I letter it, because I do all the production work, because there's no one to turn to and like hand it off with a smile and then walk away and do another project. When I've done a thing, I'm like, okay, I've done that. I want to do something different now. Because I can't imagine like the amount of effort it takes to make a book and then doing a book about the exact same subject. I would just fall apart. I am not interested. I need to stay fresh. So like Parasocial, like I love writing horror is my comfort place. So I will always go back to writing horror. If I'm feeling a little upset or weird or like anxious, I will just write a horror book. But then I get really into I'm really, really enjoying with the book with Tom Fowler, exploring things that aren't even part of the main narrative, but which are the relationship of particularly the character of the king, who is based on one of the well-known but not well-known kings of England, and how he met his end and what people did right afterwards. And all of it is based in what historically actually happened. And it's both like his own goddamn fault and incredibly tragic. Mm-hmm. I'm a character writer, so I just get really into people in situations and how they react and what they do. There are two kinds of writers generally. There's character writers and there's world builders. And the way you tell the difference is you ask them what they think of Dune, the book. And if they say, I read that first fucking 100 pages of that thing, like nothing happened, I dropped it, I couldn't stand it, they're a character writer. If they're like, it's amazing, I love it, it's the best book I've ever read, they're a world builder.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting about the Magpie stuff and how it like feeds into the different types of projects you work on. Is that part of the reason? I mean, I'm not saying that you universally always want to do them, but you're one of the few people I know who's actually taken on anthologies you've written yourself. Like one you did Twisted Romance, and then you did the war one whose name is completely escaping me right now.
True War Stories.
Yes.
Hopefully I will get Image to reprint it because Z2 was changing ownership at the time it was put out, so there was almost no marketing, which was insane because it should have sold like 100,000 copies on military bases.
Mm-hmm.
That was super fun. Like True War Stories was great. I didn't write a single word of it, but I was working with a bunch of authors who were often first-time comics authors to create autobiographical stories. You can still get this on the Z2 website. I create autobiographical stories that accurately reflected their lived experience, and that both went from helping them create a comics script that worked to making sure that like the patches on deployment were all the muted patches and the flag was facing the right way on the shoulder patch and, you know, stuff like that. Kai Krumbar, my co-editor, was extremely helpful in that regard. She's an Iraq war veteran. And, you know, we split the work right down the middle. I did all the lettering, which was nice because I think where a lot of anthologies fall apart is the quality is very up and down. And because we had a lot of control over it, and in fact, we were essentially writing some of the scripts for people based on a phone call with them or based on discussions or based on emails they'd sent, or, you know, in the case of one absolute total army captain, you know, like a PDF with like embedded pictures and stuff. It was so well organized. I'm like, this is why you're a captain. So yeah, I lettered all of it. And so there was a very consistent look to it and a very high consistent quality standard. And I think that more anthology people should do that and just have one person letter the book. So it's all in the same like lettering font and there's a consistent similarity. And also for Twisted Romance, which has been this weirdly perennially good seller. You know, I wrote some of the stories and the other stories were either written by people I know. There were backup stories that were prose stories, like 4,000 to 5,000 word prose fiction or 8-page stories written and drawn by somebody else. And again, I did all the lettering on the main stories. And I did all the design work. So there's a very consistent design. That book was insane. Like, I don't know what possessed me to go, yes, I will create a 48-page weekly comic for the month of February 2018, and I will ship it on time.
It's the Magpie heart. I mean, that's what I was getting at. I was like,
but I did it. And but also like, I think sometimes that's why, like, I sort of can't believe that Image continues willingly publishing my work. I mean, I'm a niche author. Like I'm never going to be like a giant A-list bestseller. I think part of it is just that I get my shit done on time and to a high quality standard, and there's very little stress for them. I just like hand them a book and they're like, hey, you misspelled that word on page 28. And I don't need to tell you, I shouldn't have to tell you this again, but like 6th issue takes a hyphen on the back cover and then you're done. And I'm like, okay, I'll fix that. I go in and fix it, re-upload it to the production folder and like, okay, we're done. That's it. Like,
so I actually have a theory about this. I mean, you're saying you're a niche author, but I think it's interesting to think about your work also through the prism of the fact that, like, in a lot of ways, you don't need comics. Like you could stop writing comics and you could, you know, you have your day job and everything else. So it allows you to, in a lot of ways, like when I read your stuff, it doesn't feel like something somebody else is doing. It feels like something only you would do. Like I read like Hell's Kitchen Movie Club and it's like that comic should exist and I'm glad it exists and you absolutely kill it. And it's like it takes somebody like your perspective and with your kind of level of freedom to be able to do that. And I do wonder.
Marvel then tried to do a little miniseries with Frank and Bucky, or like they have them co-star. Like it was bad.
Yeah, but I think that like in a lot of ways, because you don't need it, and because you have all these interests that are different, it allows you to kind of really just be you. And I think that a lot of people respond to that because it's like you're not trying to be like the next sci-fi hit. You're not trying to be this. You're just being
they're
like
not
this.
Pitches for movies. They're not auditions for a Marvel career. They're just like here. Like, and I'm always kind of amazed that like here's my weird upcoming medieval heist book. Like, and a bunch of people will like it that I didn't expect to like it because it's just like I'm going to follow. And I'm also always amazed when artists want to work with me or draw my work because, here's this odd book with this very specific script about something that nobody else is writing a book about.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it's long. Except for the Erica stuff where I try to keep it fairly short. People are like, it's not long enough. I'm like, all my books with Erica are based on the grindhouse tradition of you get in and you're out by minute 90, leave them wanting more. I can't ask Erica to draw this giant book with no advance. I mean, our books earn well and we split all the money 50-50, and we split all, if there's Hollywood money, we split that 50-50 too. But like, they think we can just like magic up these 250-page books, bless their hearts.
I like that you and Erica kind of do more like graphic. I don't want to say graphic novella because I feel like that's diminishing, but like shorter graphic novels, like Dracula Motherfucker is very, it's tight and it really works, I think, better because of that.
Yeah, people are so used to the dragged out 6-issue mini.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, like when you read it, I think it reads better because it's so focused. Same with Parasocial. It's like if you stretched that out too long, it would have had probably diminishing returns. It needed to be this tight, tense boiler room of like just stress as you read it for everyone involved.
Yeah, and then with the 2 giant twists at the end.
Yeah, I think that you're actually like better off for doing that. And it's kind of like, we'd emailed and we talked about like your affinity for hardcovers and how like you and like Brubaker and Phillips are really the only ones that do it. I think that, I mean, I'm not saying that this is like necessarily the way it plays out, but it's like, it makes it more appealing to me as a reader to be able to buy this like one beautiful hardcover, especially when you get the Escape Pod one that has Yuko Shimizu cover on there. When you get that and it's just like, you get that and you're just going to get this awesome story. It's like getting like an hour and 30 to hour and 45 minute movie that just like, you live in and you're immersed in it and then you're out. It doesn't have to stretch out just so you can like, I don't know, sell more. I don't know.
And the pacing always feels a little different from something that's come out in issues anyway, because like the pacing is more, is less kind of this like da-dun, da-dun, da-dun kind of thing. It's you can pull more. I mean, the image hardbacks are I'm frustrated because it's Dark Horse book, because mine's like 250 pages, going to be a paperback because Dark Horse. And it'll cost like the same as Bad Karma or more. The image hardbacks are one of the main reasons, other than the amazing deal and the fact the production staff are really awesome, and so is the marketing staff. One of the reasons I stay with Image. They will always do a hardback for me. I can do those amazing end papers that are part of the I can go like really design nerdy on it. And because we essentially get our books ready on bookstore market timelines, Image is able to do things like do an arc for ALA. And like the reason a lot of comics haven't crossed over to bookstore is people do their 6-issue minis. They're all like told that's what they have to do. And then they immediately shit out a trade paperback, and bookstores can't cope with that. That's not how bookstores and libraries work. They expect for the 98% of the rest of their books, they are marketed to 9 months to a year in advance. And the book is ready to go on things like ALA lists and in Library Journal and all these places. I mean, the library audience is incredibly, incredibly important. And we do that because we finish the book really early. Because also, like, I've made so many books now, I don't honestly give a shit when the book comes out. I don't have to do another book. The book doesn't have to be out now. So we can always keep production schedules to something that is doable for my team. Like Bad Karma, both Ryan and Dee were paid. They weren't paid a ton. They did get paid like advanced page rates, but they were also, they've got families. Dee's got other work. Ryan's got a webcomic he does and a day job. It took us 4 years to finish Bad Karma, and that's fine because everybody had a good time making it. And that's really important. Like, it's important to me that my collaborators have a good time. And then when it came out, like, we finished it in March. Well, I finished all the relettering and like delivered it to Image as a thing in March. And then we had 8 months for Image to be able to market it. Likewise, Parasocial. So the hardback is a nicer object. It costs less than most trade paperbacks. Like Parasocial costs less than a Marvel trade, a 4-issue trade.
Some cars cost less than a Marvel trade.
They last longer, at least, even the Cybertrucks.
It's true. It's
a higher quality book. It's a nice object that racks spine out in bookstores. It's easily sellable from online booksellers that can go in the package. The long lead times make the marketing machine and Image, which is a big machine that's very good, really be able to do their most with it. And I just like the books. They feel nice.
One thing I think is interesting about not to, Scrapper is a 6-issue mini, and this is not me trying to diminish the idea of a mini series or anything like that. But I often am told that the reason why like those things happen is because, they create cash flow, and it's like those 6 issues pay for like the trade that eventually comes out. And then like that can be a bigger winner. But I do think that there's something to the idea of having that mini series means there's 7 points of focus instead of 1. And like, it's harder to, like you were talking about with like librarians and stuff, it's like they don't know what to do with it. It's just like when you have bad karma and you have like 8 months of promotional window just pushing this one thing to librarians and bookstores, it makes it easier. When you have that for Parasocial, it makes it easier. When it's like the mini series to trade, it's like a little bit, you have to splinter the marketing focus, and it makes it, I think, a little bit more difficult to push. And then there's also like, you know, the distribution stuff that goes into that, but there's not one answer.
And Eric's always like, why don't you do it? Why don't you serialize it? Because you'll make more money. And I'm like, I sort of don't care. I mean, I will always ask my collaborators how they want the book to be put out. I say, like, this is the way I prefer to do it. I'm happy to do it in some form of issues if you want. Like, and they're usually like, nah, because a lot of them are doing it around other projects. So they can kind of like, my project is the one they work on when they're work for hire gigs, when the script is late. So they bounce in, do like 10 pages while they're waiting for, like, you know, like fucking Iron Man or whatever. And so, you know, it makes the book kind of like a nice vacation for them. And then when it comes out, it's a bigger deal, rather than being like, okay, now so we have to have this many pages done by this month and then this many pages by that month. The 6-issue thing, also one of the things I learned, because my co-writer on Scrapper is the games designer Cliff Blazinski, who is the guy behind Gears of War, among several other games. And having to explain to his gigantic games fan base how to order a single issue comic when they don't regularly go to comic book stores. Like that was also like, that was the nail in the coffin of me wanting to do single issues. Cause I'm like, I had to make this like fucking e-link site that like had links to the few stores that had good online sales in like the UK, in Ireland, in Canada, in the US. I had to ask Third Eye Comics to make a special mini store so people could just point and click. Because otherwise you're like, oh, well, if it's not out yet, you have to go to the pre-order site. And if it is out already, the store may not have any copies because you didn't pre-order it. But you can also check then on this other part of the site, which isn't intuitive. And like, fuck that. Like, just Jesus, Mary and Joseph, like, how hard is it to like, how many hoops do you want to put in front of people to jump through to buy your book? I just want to be like, go to your favorite bookseller or comic shop. They will have it or can order it for you. It's that simple. Thank you very much. Good night.
Mm-hmm. It is very miserable trying to explain that stuff to people. But I want to go over like the identities of the 3 books. Like one is Parasocial with your Dracula Motherfucker collaborator, Erica Henderson, which is about a once heartthrob genre TV star whose convention experience takes quite the turn when he faces off against an obsessive fan. I think you described it as misery for the social media era.
I do. But the funny thing is, like, it's not like I love describing it as that because it is absolutely what it is, but it's totally not.
It's a shorthand.
The fun thing about Dracula Motherfucker is it, you know, the shorthand is it's Dracula 1974 LA. And really both books, and in fact, most of the books I'm looking at continuing to do with Erica, we take a very well-known subject or previous story, in this case, like in Dracula Motherfucker's case, Bram Stoker's Dracula. In Parasocial's case, even though I've actually never read Misery. I think I saw the movie when it came out a billion years ago, or at least part of it. So I'm only vaguely, like, I sort of know what goes on. Kathy Bates is sort of all I know. We took the idea surrounding that. And while we're true to that, so if you're a fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's a lot of fun stuff in Dracula Motherfucker that you'll enjoy. And if you're a fan of Misery, there's a lot of fun stuff in parallels you can draw. Ultimately, the books are about something else.
Yeah. I mean, I told Erica, I was like, it's like Misery, but if both characters were James Caan and Kathy Bates.
Yeah. Like Dracula Motherfucker is about cycles, like, cycles of abuse and being complicit in, assuming you can change somebody when you can't, and the complicity of people joining into a toxic relationship and thinking it'll be different for them. Parasocial is very much about the quest for immortality through art and what happens when you're a mid-career 40s creative and your best work might be behind you and it might all be downhill from there. In fact, you might not be getting any more work.
But you do have 3 million Instagram followers.
But you do. Twitter.
Oh, Twitter. Was it Twitter? Oh, my bad. Sorry.
And so there's a lot of there are a lot of literary themes that Eric and I bring to our books that also they're mostly invisible, because really the books are about entertaining you, but they are below the surface for the people who want to dig into it.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. We're heading into the end of the year, but the campaigns keep launching on Zoop. There's still time to support the legendary Howard Chaykin's campaign and descendant of Bram Stoker, Dacre Stoker's Tale of Dracula, and keeping it spooky as Ghosts from Cullen Bunn and Shannon Eric Denton. Finally, you do not want to miss out on the launch of an artisan edition book featuring John Buscema, Gil Kane, Barry Windsor-Smith, and other A-list artists. Head over to zoop.gg to support the live campaigns and sign up for the ones coming soon. It takes less than 30 seconds to create an account, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. And of course, every creator appreciates your support. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. But so another of the books is Bad Karma with Ryan Howe and Dee Cunniffe. That's about a couple of veterans who are looking to free an innocent man. We talked about that a bit already. And then we have Scrapper, which is at Image with co-writer Cliff Bleszinski, artist Sandy Drell, and Ryan Kelly, and colorist Jordi Belair. That's about a stray dog fighting for justice against the totalitarian forces of a post-apocalyptic domed city. That's a graphic novel published at Image, a Panel Syndicate first series collected as a hardcover at Image, and a miniseries you're co-writing at Image. This is the stuff that I find really interesting about you, where, like, we talked about it already, the Magpie Heart, but all those projects are way different. The formats are different. Even the publishing, like publishers are different. You're co-writing in one, you're not co-writing in the other two. I'm curious as to how you decide what's next. Is it just very much like feel-based? It seems like you always have a lot of irons in the fire. Like, how do you decide which project is the right one for you to take on at the right time?
Just for the listeners, Bad Karma, if you like Die Hard or Lethal Weapon, Bad Karma is probably very much your sort of thing. Scrapper, what if the cat in Stray could actually kick Skynet's ass? There are cats in the book, so if you're like, that's nice, I'm not a dog person. There are many other animals in the book, including the pigeons who have become somewhat famous. I
do want to say, I wish more comics like Bad Karma existed. It is a great comic, and it feels like a movie Bucky and Frank would really appreciate, which is funny because of its origins. It's such a good comic, and I really wish more existed. Sorry, not to sidetrack.
It's tough. Like there's no publisher out there who is really creating adult genre graphic novels to a high quality. I mean, obviously, like there's Image, there's Dark Horse, there's some of the other publishers, but like in terms of one with a good creator-owned rights contract, which gets rid of 90% of the comics companies, pretty much everyone except for Dark Horse, Mad Cave, and Image. Whenever any graphic novel is published, it is a minor miracle because they're so hard to make and they take so much effort and time. But there's nobody out there like giving livable advances and fair contracts to people who want to create adult genre graphic novels, which is hilarious because we've got this giant like YA and middle grade machine. And then where do those kids go afterwards? Like, where's the rest of the pipeline? Come on.
Seemingly manga.
It's manga. Like, it's manga. I mean, honestly, a lot of the kids they're trying to reach with the US YA and graphic novel stuff actually just read manga. And I my daughter, like, I have a 12-year-old daughter. She looks at some of the YA and middle grade graphic novels coming out. She's like, man, that art's really ugly. Because she's used to like Witch Hat Atelier and like Demon Slayer. And Witch Hat Atelier is like amazing art. So like, I really wish more middle grade and YA Big Five publishers actually either had children or interacted with children on a more regular basis, because I think that they would have a very different view about what their audience picks up and what attracts them to things than some of the stuff they put out. It's sort of like, I don't know if you've seen the Blue-Eyed Samurai thing on Netflix, which is beautifully animated. I'm begging them to watch one anime, like just one, and understand that audience, because it's like kind of an anime, but also they had to center a half Caucasian character, and it's all about like honor on my family and shame, and like it reads like a C.B. Cebulski comic, and a Akira Yoshida comic. And then there's like a ton of like really cringy nudity and sex in it. And I get it. Like they're trying to be like, let's make something real, make something adult. And it's like, well, actually your audience for that are teenagers who are super into anime. And congratulations, you just lost them. Because my daughter just left the room. And after 2 episodes, she's like, is there going to be a lot more sex in it? And I'm like, we can fast forward past it. Do you want to see episode 3? She's like, not really.
Yeah. Going back to the original question of like, how do you decide what the next project is? Because it seems like you have a lot going on at all times.
Sort of vibes. I mean, I'm always working on ideas for stories, but I have to do a lot of research. I start sketching out characters. I have a little notebook that's like a moleskin stuffed with ideas. I always have one of those running. And then like there's a point at which the story achieves kind of a critical mass. And it's usually with me knowing how it ends. I'm very good at beginnings. 30-page vomit draft of the opening of a story, easy peasy. Good at middles, but then like the ending has to make me happy, and I have very, very high standards that it has to be surprising, it has to be interesting, it has to stay with you. Like that was a big thing about Parasocial. Is like Parasocial was 90% written for a very long time, and then I needed to figure out the ending Because you would think the ending would be very binary, like one survives. And once I figured out the two twists at the end, I was like, okay, yes, this is a story. This is a story I can put out and have my name on it and feel good about it. And I can give to Erica and be like, I think this is good. Terms and conditions apply. And so it's the ideas like gradually like get longer as my mind kind of turns to them in moments of quiet, and then eventually they feel like they're a full story. But then sometimes like the process is reversed. Like sometimes you're just shit posting on the internet and like you end up with an artist for a book and you're like, oh, I actually have to write this now. Luckily, Tom is very patient, and I then went out and read a bunch more books on this particular time period and did the outline and sent it to him, and we went over it and page links for sections and stuff like that, story ideas, and now it's actually ready to script. The book with Erica again. The next book with Erica, I've got a vomit draft of like the first 12 pages, and now we're working through the rest of it, and it's not ready yet. It's like nowhere near ready.
Erica said that she was not originally the artist for Parasocial.
No, but she wasn't the original artist for Dracula Motherfucker either. I wrote Dracula Motherfucker for Katie Skelly after Twisted Romance.
Oh.
And after like 3 years, Katie's like, I'm just not going to do this. Like, I just have other things going on now. And I'm like, that's cool. I love you. That's fine. And asked Erica. And then I wrote Parasocial, and she was busy. She was on a graphic novel.
Yeah.
I think the Ryan one. And then there was another one. Yeah. There was another one that was supposed to start right after that. She was going to go back to back on another big graphic novel that she'd already been commissioned for by a big five publisher. So she wasn't available. So I asked another artist who'd done a mini series with a friend of mine that I quite liked. And that artist was coming off a Boom series that kind of gave them a nervous breakdown, as Boom series often do to artists. And, I was like, look, you can take as long as you want to draw it. I just need the first 10 pages so I can make sure, because, so I can get a publisher for it. And they couldn't even do that. And then they kept trying changing their art styles. And like, they were just really having a hard time of it. And I'm like, look, this is not
Sure.
This isn't going to work. It's very important in collaborative relationships, both to realize when it works, but also when it realize when it doesn't work. And it's not a negative thing. It's just sometimes it's the wrong timing, or, they're not they're not really feeling inspired by your script, or they find it really difficult or unexpectedly difficult, or it's just, something else comes along that's going to pay them really well as a better opportunity. And you just say, okay, it's not working. Let's split up. I'll find someone else. I contacted Erica and said, look, remember this thing? It's really, really weird. I'm sorry. I probably need a lot of therapy. Here, do you have any time for it? And she's like, yeah, my other graphic novel just got pushed back. Let me have a look at it. And she liked it. So that was it.
So you write very full script, and you have those parameters we talked about at the beginning, where it's like you have the structure that they can operate within. But when you write your scripts, do you write with specific artists in mind for the project, or is it very much you're just writing and then they make it their own thing when they take it on? I
mean, I do keep the artist in mind. Like Katie Skelly doesn't really like drawing backgrounds. So a lot of and she likes lower panel count pages. So that was part of what informed Dracula Motherfucker, which I rewrote once it went to Erica. Erica will never let me forget that the artist I was originally writing for was outside the US and hadn't necessarily been to a US convention. So I had I was explaining conventions, and she's like, I know what a green room looks like, Alex. I know why you did this. Bless your heart. No.
I kind of feel like Erica was born for Parasocial. It feels very on vibe for her.
Well, I think I would have been thrilled if if the timing had worked out first time around, but it didn't. But it worked out in the end, which is what's important. And she's really good about the way we collaborate too, because I think a lot of artists might not be cool with me, doing all those text panels and kind of being very part of the page design and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, leave this space blank. I'm going to put a fake archive of our own fic header in this.
Got to put some fan fiction in there.
Oh, yeah. But that's also part of the kind of documenting the fandom experience in a very realistic, but almost slightly voyeuristic way. Because there's going to be a ton of people who pick it up who feel more engaged with the story because it reflects direct experience.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's interesting to think, reading your books, there's all these elements where it seems like you're a very visual thinker. You had the Instagram stuff in there, you had the cameo stuff in there, but there's also musical elements. And I know that I mentioned earlier you directed music videos, but it's everywhere in Parasocial. There's songs every couple pages, but then there's a very specific song, Jonathan Richman's New England, that comes up in Bad Karma as well. And I do think it's interesting to think about how you write, because it seems like you can't separate visuals and even music from what you do as you're writing it in a lot of ways. I may be overthinking that side, though.
Well, no, you're not really. Like, I mean, the funny thing is I write in almost complete silence. I write in kind of very monastic conditions, and I can't have any talking. I don't really like that music in the background. But for me, the sense of writing and the sense of pacing is a very musical sense. I feel a rhythm to the story, which is like the rhythm of a song. There are fast parts, there are slow parts, there are suddenly loud parts, like, and that's kind of how I know how pacing works if the song is working in my head. I'm somewhat synesthetic, and like I wanted to express the crowdedness of a convention, and the best way I could think of doing that was referencing the Avalanche's Frontier Psychiatrist, which is this wonderful cut-up song from like 25 years ago.
It's amazing.
But it's a song that sounds like walking into a crowded convention, because like 8 billion things are happening all at once and they continue to happen. And there's some wild stuff in that song. And it's kind of like walking in and like, oh, look, there's Voltron, or like,
I mean, that boy also does need therapy, so that fits really well too.
Everyone in that story needs therapy.
Yeah.
I also really I come out of a very DIY zine background. So I love marginalia. I mean, if you've ever read Jamie Hewlett's Haircut, which is a 2000 AD story, there's like all of these like little bits of marginalia in there. And I just love that. I love that very like handmade feeling to something. So like scrawling song titles in the margins made it feel more handmade and like engaged and interesting, and gives like a little bit of extra something for the reader, though, they can very easily read it. The songs are not super obvious. They're actually quite a small like handwriting font just in the margins every so often. So you can actually go through the whole book and ignore them if you want. There are like 3 diegetic songs. It's Frontier Psychiatrist, which is done as like a closed captioning thing, because that amused me. He's listening in the car to the Mountain Goats this year, which is a very kind of like you're in your mid 40s and you're listening to Sunset Tree on repeat, like you need therapy. That's like a direct no scope on a couple of people, but anyway, including myself. And then the ending song, which is just so perfect. I love it, which I won't spoil. And the rest of them are just, you can take them or leave them. They're just me having fun with the theme of the text and story. But like, why not? Why not make little margin notes with songs in them? And then, of course, there is a Bad Karma movie happening, and I adapted it. And I was adapting it at the same time I was finishing the back matter for Bad Karma and the epilogue. And they always say, like, never put needle drops in your screenplays, a rule I like to ignore. And I put in, like, sort of the end scenes was like Jonathan Richman's New England. It's just it's such a perfect song for those guys and that ending, because it's kind of goofy, it's really hummable, it's like it's Jonathan Richman, it's like it's dorky and it's amazing. And you can just see, like, I mean, realistically it should have been like Godsmack or or like one of the other Boston noise bands, but I feel that people will forgive me if what was a Boston Irish band? It's not Flogging Molly because they're from the West Coast.
Dropkick Murphys.
Yes. I also thought, like, if this does happen and they do use this needle drop, I would like the money to go to Jonathan Richman.
Yeah.
And also introduce a whole new generation of people to this, like, incredible song.
It's a great song. And
it's like, because the ending of Bad Karma is so happy. It's like so fucking happy. And that song, like, it's just impossible to be upset when you're listening to Jonathan Richman's New England. And it is very apt for them because it talks about, like, going all around the world, but being happy in New England. I
do want to say, you mentioned earlier that you don't listen to things when you write. On your website, you do have a starter kit to get to know you. And one of those was your ideal writing music, which is a Spotify mix called Top Cat Music for Rascals, which I started listening to when I was prepping for this. And it is fantastic. I absolutely love it. Even if you don't write listening to stuff, I'm glad you included that because I even shared it with my wife. I think she will enjoy it too.
Oh, I've just added a bunch of new stuff to it. That started out, I created that playlist for my friend Jay Edidin, who likes to write to music but can't have any words.
Oh, yeah.
It has to be instrumental. So I made it for him because I knew a bunch of this. There's a bunch of like jazz and blues stuff that I liked, and it also is a road trip playlist for me. My daughter loves it. Like, we would drive before she got super into J-pop, and we now listen to her J-pop and Undertale playlist and video game music playlist. Who knew that Genshin Impact had such amazing theme music? I do now. She would be like, oh, can you put on Top Cat? Can you put on the jazz playlist? And like my 10-year-old was asking for a jazz playlist, and I figured I'd kind of won at parenting.
Yeah. It's a great playlist. And now I'm going to have to listen to Genshin Impact's music because I've not listened to it, but I would like to now.
Oh, okay. So if you look up Hoyomix, HOYO-MIX, it's all the character themes from Genshin, all caps, Spotify, and they're really good. Weirdly, the Ace Attorney theme music also slaps from the anime because like she got really into Ace Attorney. She decided she wanted to be a lawyer from Ace Attorney. I'm like, I'm not arguing, but also a lot is like very different from this.
Oh my God. Kids make a lot of interesting decisions. When I was a kid, I watched this, I don't remember what it was called. It was a movie starring Michael J. Fox where it was a concierge. And I realized that I thought a concierge was like the coolest job you could possibly have because you just like help people do cool things. To the point where my dad, for take your son to work or take your son or daughter to work day, he negotiated with a local hotel to allow me to work in their hotel for a day. And I very quickly realized that I don't think I want to work in a hotel. But I worked as a concierge. I worked as a doorman. I really enjoyed being a doorman. It was nice holding doors open for people and just being nice to people and like a wide variety of roles. But concierge, I was like, this, I don't think is as Michael J. Foxy as they made it seem. You learn a lot.
She's old enough now to also sort of understand money.
Oh, sure.
And like, because before she'd be like, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, that's an amazing career. There are a lot of great people doing it. It pays almost nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm just being that mom where I'm like trying to guide the kid to something that's actually going to make her like a decent, like to keep her in the lifestyle to which she's become accustomed. But yeah, no, Top Cat's a lot of fun. That is still one of my favorite playlists. But I will, like Hoyomix is the best way to get into the Genshin themes, and they are very good.
I will check it out. Well, just a couple more questions. I want to bring lettering back up. One of my patrons in specific, Don Liebold, wanted to know more about that interaction between writer and letterer. He asked, how does knowing you're the letterer influence your writing?
I mean, I try to get it right on the page, on the script. But also, I think that it's not necessarily my experience of lettering has made me much more honest about writing and making sure that I don't have too many words in per panel. And if I do, if it's a big like talking panel, just as a big health warning going like lots of words, leave me lots of headroom. And like, it's not a bunch of words and everybody's like shouting and, North Star is coming out in the middle of his fight in the frozen food section of a Canadian supermarket to Major Maple Leaf. One of the greatest moments in comics as he throws a box of tater tots. I make a note, I plan that this is going to be something with a lot of words in it and there's no background. It's the character talking. I mean, there's one page there are a couple pages in Bad Karma where we just have a splash page and it's two or three people having a conversation. And one of them, there's almost like you see a character who's kind of turned away on a bench, not listening in like three images and like, of increasing saturation where first she starts off leaning away, then she's here, and then she's actually engaging with the person. And that's the sort of thing, like just generally having done the craft myself makes me better able to do the craft in the future because I understand how it works. I understand, when it's best to divide words into two balloons, what's too much for one balloon, ways you can pull the balloons across the page or between panels, or effects you can do with lettering, sound effects. I'll say things like, leave me a fat gutter because I'm going to put a giant kaboom in there. Leave me a blank vertical panel because I'm going to put a buzzing sound in there. So it makes me better able to plan and visualize the letters, like the sound effect in the mouth that we started with.
Yeah.
The girl is shouting and it says Lily in her mouth. I think also knowing that I'm the letterer can make me a little bit lazy occasionally because I can be like, I will fix this in post.
Right. And when you do the lettering edit.
SFX in post,
Yeah.
So I try not to be lazy though, because I always am mad at past me when I open up the script and I'll sound effect it in post once I see the art. And I'm like, because the guardrails of the complete script I find very nice because you feel great when you're like, oh, I have these guardrails. I'm going to change just 1-2 little things. You feel like you're doing your job, like you're just making it better. But when you're like wholly bringing it up from nothing because there's nothing on the script, you feel like you're just like, I want more drafts of this. I'm a inveterate rewriter. I mean, all my scripts live on Dropbox so that I can continue to tweak things as somebody is drawing the book. I mean, obviously, like I'm like 50 pages ahead of them. I'm not tweaking the thing that they're drawing that month because that's just asshole behavior. But I am, continually like going in and never knowing when to stop.
I often find that my best friend and my worst enemy is past me. It's just like the things that they did or didn't do is always impacting me in the present, and there's no perfect answer one way or another. But last question I had for you is something that came from a Comics Journal interview that I read with you that Katie Skelly did with you from 2018 on what drove you to writing prose was that you said you were so tired of producing graphic novels, you'll never leave comics. It'll be more a shared custody thing, but since I made the choice to split my time, it's made me a lot happier. That was in reference to all the background work that goes into bringing a project to life, which is a lot. I mean, there's always a ton of stuff that's going on. I wanted to ask about the never leaving comics, though. You have a day job. You have a lot of things going on. You have 3 dogs currently behind you. What keeps you coming back? Like, what makes it a medium you can't resist?
The opportunities for experimentation and the collaboration with people. And also, I love telling stories visually. It's about how much I can tell with how few words. I use silence a lot. In fact, my favorite sequence in Parasocial is just watching someone's face change in a 3-panel sequence in a tier as a shadow falls over them and the shadow resolves into something. That was a perfect sequence as far as I'm concerned. You know, a lot of comics writers feel like sitcom writers, and it's all very dialogue based. And while dialogue is incredibly important, you know, I would much rather have be creating thrilling visual moments without words, via the juxtaposition of images, via the editing, via the page turn. And there's nowhere you can really do that except comics. I love art. I do love the process of it. You know, every so often, like, it's not easy. It gets very tiring. It would be amazing if, you know, like Penguin or some big publisher swept in and said, have some money. This will, you know, like, give us 3 books. That's never going to happen because of just the way trade publishing works. But, you know, there's a knowledge that is never going to happen. And it will always be this Sisyphean effort. Most of the time I'm up for it. Occasionally I'm not. I'm reaching a point, like, for the rest of this year where I'm kind of like going to take it off, because I've had, like, it's been a giant year for me, and I have so many books out, and I just need a little break, and then I can go back to writing.
Yeah. You got to know yourself, and you got to give especially in your situation, you got to give yourself time to not burn yourself out on comics. And that seems like it's a good way to maintain your love, is not like pushing when you don't have to push. Yeah.
I mean, one thing about, just looping back to our discussion about when is a project ready to actually begin production on, it's when you no longer have to push it. You're just generally kind of pushing at the story and pushing it, like, people to be involved in the story. And then there's a moment where it kind of all comes together and you're no longer having to push, and it has a little momentum on its own. And someone says, yes. And, like, I can start here, and, like, let's do this. And then suddenly it's a thing. There will be moments when you have to push again, but yeah, you then need to kind of also, like, take a little break.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're taking it, because you've had a very busy year. But Alex, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about your work, your career, and everything you do, because there's a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Alex de Campi. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Alex de Campi, her website at alexdecampi.com, and her work in Bad Karma, Scrapper, and Parasocial at Image Comics. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in and editing this podcast. If it sounds better than usual, it's because of her. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @sketchcomic, or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Charlie Stickney, Rick Remender, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Alan Ellsworth, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Kenny Myers, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polges, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockery, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lampert, Brian Holt, Chris Doré, Near Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Boren, James Steiner IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Submit Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePills, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Holt, Philip Myra, Chris Bachala, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Walt's Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Gipp, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwatt, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, Dave Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfill, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.